Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have an assortment of experiences that I'm looking forward to sharing with you, ranging from subscriber-submitted experiences I picked up along the way, and some government alien/reptilian case files. Before we jump into all of that, though, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below, merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into today's upload, shall we? Before we jump into any of these experiences, a couple quick things that I'd like to share. 2 days ago, I did an upload where I went up to where Tom Messick disappeared. Title was Missing 411 or 411 in the Adirondacks. And there was a comment that I kind of felt was a little rude, asking why I'm talking about a decade-old case. Why are we talking about a decade-old case? And this and that. One, it's because it happened where I live. You know, it's 35 minutes from my house. Two, I want to talk about it because it's my channel. And three, the guy has been missing for 9 years. His family still wants answers. So I will stop talking about it or going up there when eventually I either get sick of talking about it and going up there, or I find something to share with law enforcement. The second was there was a comment stating that the article that I had shared didn't say minus 25 degrees. And with the research that I do, I take very seriously. Just like I won't ever stop talking about the Tom Messick case until there's some kind of resolve. I won't stop talking about Brenda Hamilton, Tony Aarons, Amber Miller, Dr. Nancy Shaw, any of those cases. Why? Because there's still no answers, and those people have families, they had lives, they don't deserve to just be forgotten by the media, government, and us. So when I do some research and when I start talking about cases and such, I make sure that I'm sharing the true information that I find. And it said, because I had said something about where I live, it has not hit minus 25 degrees. The lowest it's hit was like 14 degrees. And winds have hit 30 or 20 to 30 miles per hour and created whiteouts, wind chills below minus 25 degrees Fahrenheit. I shared that exactly word for word. I went back and looked at it. And for some reason, this person wanted to either say it was in Celsius or Fahrenheit. Either or, it still has not reached minus 25. Newcomb, New York is like 40 minutes west of me. And I was just saying, you know, there's a lot of just weird information getting tossed around. And I shared a forum from the Adirondacks. There's an Adirondack forum, and someone who lives up here shared some information and some of their views on the case as well. And I just shared that. There's just a lot of strange stuff going around this Leo Dufour case. My personal belief is something, I don't think that he even made it even close to the summit. I don't think I think whatever happened very close to his vehicle, to be quite frank with you. Last thing that I wanted to talk about, yesterday's upload with Kitty. At the end of every upload, I put, thank you for supporting the channel. Because of your support, we can share our experiences and theories, judgment-free. I saw about, I don't even know, countless comments ridiculing her. All right, if you don't have anything to say constructive or respectful, don't comment or just don't listen to the channel. Bounce. Truthfully, I don't care. This isn't a drama. This is a drama-free channel. I don't like when people are ridiculed or trashed for sharing their experience or who their personality is. You know, if you want to talk about me for saying a lot, go ahead. You know, I really take it for the source of who's saying it. But when you're insulting guests, I don't need that. And that is just truthfully disgusting. So I will, and my mods will, block those comments from now on. Because people who share don't deserve that. And I state it in every video, and people still do it. So anyway, I look out for people that are sharing on my channel because we get enough ridicule for believing in these creatures, knowing these creatures exist. Yet you're going to ridicule somebody and you know or believe these creatures exist. Where does that put you? Anyway, I apologize for those of you who had to listen to the rant. Let's jump into it. First experience. Jeff, good afternoon. My name is Elle. I came across your channel, and I would like to talk to you about a dogman that I named Feller. I moved and purchased a home in Big Bear, California. I still live here today. In the year of 2008, 2 months after purchasing my home, I was outside on my patio early in the morning and I observed a wolf. It was a pretty good size. It was in the tall grass, so all I saw was half of its legs and up. I thought it looked kind of weird looking because it looked like it had shoulders, just like a person's. But I figured maybe it was deformed. The fur was pitch black and very shiny and pretty. So I figured it may belong to somebody. It was in view for only a couple of seconds till it left, so I figured maybe it'd come back and I can try feeding it. And maybe I can get it to come a little closer so I can see if it may possibly belong to someone. I was able to get some leftover meat from the butcher shop, and I had it near the tall grass where I saw it that day. It was probably 2 to 3 hours later. I went to check and the meat was gone again. Could have been anything that got the meat, so I tried again. This time, I was by my window for a couple of hours, and it did come back. I was mind blown when I saw that it had arms and hands like I do. Only its arms were more toned and abnormally long. The hands looked like that of a raccoon, only much bigger. At that moment, I realized this is no ordinary wolf or dog. A couple days later, I decided to try again and feed it, but this time I would be outside and I was able to see it again. It did the same thing, using its hands to grab the food and eat. Only this time I think I caught it off guard, and it stopped and looked at me. Then it placed one hand on the ground and lifted itself up. It was now standing on its hind legs. I was mind blown. My body felt weak and shaken. It was a flight or fight moment for me. This creature was at least 6.5 feet tall. I was sitting down in my chair, so when I stood up, I am 6'11". We stood there looking at each other for 2 minutes fully. Then it left. I started noticing it hung around my house more often. It never tried opening my door or did any kind of damage. I did not once feel threatened by him. When I noticed he was around, I wouldn't go outside at all. I decided to make him feel better. When I had leftover meat from the butcher shop, I would say his name, "Here you go, feller," and I'd walk away. It never came up to me or had any kind of interest in getting to know me, I do not believe. I did notice it would move the tires around in my yard, and sometimes I'd find them on the roof of my house and up in a tree. 1 year later, I noticed that feller had gotten bigger. I just really never noticed because when I did see him, he was on all fours till I saw him stand again. He was at least 8 feet in height, and maybe 4 or 5 years later, he was a little bigger. He was huge and very intimidating. I think 2 weeks later, I made a friend who was into cryptids and will always talk about Bigfoot. He would describe it, and what got me was how tall it would be, so that's when I asked him if it looked like a dog or wolf. He gave me a questionable look and asked me if I had ever heard of such a thing called the Dogman. Well, I had stopped being friends with him after a couple of months because all he wanted to do was come over and see feller. I felt like my property was this Dogman's safe spot. I never saw another Dogman but him. He no longer eats the food I left out for him. That stopped 2 years later after my first sighting. The closest town is about an hour away. My closest neighbor is a 15-minute drive from me. Thank you for letting me share. Second experience. The experience that I am going to share is not that long, nor that involved. But this is what happened a day in the Mekong Delta. I'd been in Vietnam for the better part of 2 years at the time of this encounter, having survived 5 vicious firefights in the jungle. On this day, I was to lead a 6-man recon patrol, with our job being, as always, find the Viet Cong wherever they may be held up. 4 of the men assigned to me had never been in the jungle before. One of the guys, Chad, was 6'5" farm boy from Idaho, who could give a bear a run for his money. He was the biggest guy in my patrol, and at his height, he weighed somewhere between 250. He was an intimidating human, to say the least. Both he and I had survived 2 firefights together in close quarter fighting, so I was glad to have him with me. We were out for 2 days, covered in face paint, leaf netting, and the whole 9. Our communication with each other was nothing but hand signals, facial expressions, and only the slightest of whispers when side by side. Other than that, it was dead silent all the time. The Mekong at the time was a dense jungle, and it was very difficult to navigate. In particular, while making no noise, the firefights, which I had been engaged in, typically began with the enemy or ourselves moving and being detected by a perimeter guard who was now. This is how we worked. 4 men rested, 2 men watched. We were in such a resting state, sitting in a small clearing, and when I say clearing, I am talking about an oblong area in the jungle, which was perhaps 50 feet long and 10 feet wide, filled with 2 to 3 foot tall plants. It was surrounded by walls of dense trees, which, too, may not seem like much of a clearing, but in the jungle, that's about as good as it got. We had only been sitting for maybe 10 minutes or so when there was some loud rustling in the brush just on the edge of this clearing in which we had sat, only 40 feet away from us. All of us rose to our feet with our guns at the ready, fully expecting for bullets to start flying any second. But what happened next was out of this world. Suddenly, out of the jungle comes this half-human, half-creature stepping into the clearing and facing us. All eyes were on it. Our gun sights followed, with not a word being spoken by any of us. This man-like creature was at least 8 feet in height, and more likely than not 400 to 500 pounds of lean muscle. It wore no clothes and was covered in sparse long hair, with its skin being exposed throughout its body. In mere seconds, it took 2 steps at us with its arms extended and razor claws out, as we all hit it in front with a burst from our M16s. The creature spun and dropped upon impact, falling to the ground as we began our retreat immediately. In the jungle, it's one and done when it comes to firing our guns. Every Viet Cong and their brother would be heading in our direction immediately, so there was no time to waste. We began making our way out, leaving this creature dead on the ground. There was virtually no decision or discussion of what had happened, with all of us knowing that conversation in the jungle can cost you and your comrades their lives. But when we made it back, the compound was abuzz with what we had to share. I have no idea what we encountered that day. In some ways it resembled a man, but only in that it stood on its hind legs. Its face being a configured somewhat of a human and that of some sort of dog-like creature. To me, it seemed like a missing link. What sealed the deal was when it virtually without hesitation began coming at us after having emerged from the jungle. It started to move very quickly, and then it was all over as soon as it had begun. The creature dropped to the ground like a sack of potatoes, and we split. All of us would have loved to get a close-up and see more of what it was, but that was not viable given the circumstances in which we found ourselves. But it was one hell of an experience that I can share to this day. Today's third experience. Back in September of 1997, I had taken my 2 hounds out for a hike with me just north of Vermilion Lake, which is due east of my home at the time in Ely, Minnesota. I was a couple of hours into the hike with the dogs rummaging around here and there in the brush, and I had made my way into an area of open forest. It was comprised of tall trees with very little undergrowth, making for great visibility as I hiked along. Rascal was the first to bolt and Sweetie followed. They were tearing it up into the trees when the 2 of them began to bark frantically. I started to jog to catch up to them, and as I finally had them in view, the 2 of them were darting around what was this large mound of black fur crouched on the ground. At that moment, there was no shape or form to what I was seeing, and the only thing that I could think was black bear that was either dead or lying in the woods. Still in a jog and edging ever closer to my dogs, suddenly this mass launched from the ground, chasing after Rascal on 4 legs. I knew then that I had been looking at this beast from the rear. It had been lying on the ground, either sleeping or eating something, just like the dogs would do on my rug. Now Sweetie was 100 pounds, and Rascal, being the larger of my 2 dogs, was at least 115. When this thing launched to fend them off, its size in comparison to my dogs dwarfed them. They appeared to be 2 puppies playing with a mama. This thing was a gigantic black wolf, such as I had never laid my eyes upon, and based on its size versus my dogs, I would say it weighed close to 400 pounds, if not more. I'd seen many wolves in this state. They usually travel in packs, but this thing was alone and jet black. Its size was not that of a timber wolf, and neither was its build. It had to be absolutely massive body, head covered with long black fur. The dogs were running in on it and then scampering away each time that it turned on them, all the while barking relentlessly. It kept turning back to where it had been lying, obviously to protect some type of food from my dogs. I saw it numerous times from the side view, and its body was about 6 feet long without its tail. With its back standing close to 4.5 feet from the ground. I don't know if it wasn't capable of running any faster, or if it was just didn't think my dogs were worth the time or effort, but it more or less seemed to just trot after them rather than bolt towards them to bite them, acting more like we were chasing a fly from our dinner plate. The scenario played out for about a minute before I called the dogs off and left. Having made my way back home over the next several weeks, I had described what happened to a number of old-timers and seasoned hunters. More than a few of them said that it sounded like I had encountered a dire wolf or something called a Dogman, a species which is said not to exist. I did a little research and saw that it was said to have existed alongside the saber-toothed tiger in North America, the dire wolf that is, and had become extinct. Well, I'm here to tell you that what I saw was certainly not extinct and was not traveling in packs. This was an enormous, vicious creature, and it is living in Minnesota. Next experience I have been meaning to share in the live streams, and I'm only sharing it now because of the experience I just shared with you happening in Vermilion Lake, Minnesota. So let's jump into this. My experience involves myself and three of my very good friends from childhood, Kevin, Ryan, and Tommy, whom I'm still good friends with to this day. Hell, I couldn't share this experience with you if it weren't for their help, consent, and experiences as well. The experience you are about to hear is true and not made up in any way. Regardless of whether we had seen things or not, the reality is we had experienced something very horrifying the night at my friend Kevin's cabin. We thought long and hard about actually sharing it or not, afraid of being ridiculed, but we are ready to share with the community, and again, you had to be there to experience it. One of my friends had actually suffered a nervous breakdown after the incident and needed counseling in itself. Regardless, I would like you to know also that I have always been a skeptic of the paranormal and find it very hard to believe in many aspects. But I love to watch, listen, and read on it simply because I always love to have an open mind in life. An open mind, in my opinion, is a growing one. Whether it was paranormal or not, someone was clearly there that night. During the midsummer, usually around the middle of July, myself and a couple of my good friends who I had just mentioned always made time to go up to one of my friend's family cabin north in the forests of Minnesota. The cabin is located in Vermilion Lake. We would always go, for sure, accompanied by my friend's dad, Kevin's dad, who owned the cabin, and sometimes a few of our dads as well. Once we were juniors in high school, we felt mature and old enough to go to the cabin on our own finally without Kevin's dad or any adult supervision. I would like to mention a little information in regards to my friend's cabin to help you picture the scenario. My friend's cabin is very remote and small based upon a large-sized island. Other cabins were on the island, but the next one closest to us was a solid quarter of a mile at least, which is my best guess, which you could get to by taking a man-made path around the island. I want to mention that to get to my friend's cabin, you had to park on a gravel road on the opposite side of the island and take his boat across the lake about a half a mile to reach the cabin. The lake is huge. My mind always has a tendency to run around when sleeping, and there at night, throughout the years, for it was all one level, with only 2 bedrooms next to one another, a kitchen/living room connected, and a bathroom in the back of the cabin. And where you slept in the cabin, there was always at least one window in each room with no curtains to it. So it was very easy to see outside to the woods and lake. This is where my mind would run, as I always thought someone or something was peering in on us. Of course, nobody ever was. I had been to this cabin at least a dozen times throughout my life, and nothing had ever happened there. And the older I got, the easier it was to sleep. I would stay a week or 4 or 5 nights. On the 3rd night during the trip, when we were finally there on our own, we had set up a campfire and had been drinking some beer all night. We went out to his dock to gaze up at the magnitude of stars and enjoy our buzz. and all of a sudden we heard something out in the water that sounded like a fish jumping out to catch a bug. We quickly looked out to the lake with curiosity, wondering where the splash had come from. Having our poles ready 24/7, thankfully the moon was out that night, which lit up the lake. Otherwise, it would have been dark as black, with being no city lights for miles upon miles, and we would not have been able to see anything on the lake. My one friend Ryan began to point out and saying, what the hell is that? After looking closely and finally spotting what he was pointing at, all I could describe was that it simply looked like a head out in the middle of the lake, just floating about, staring at us directly. It was about 3/4 worth of a football field's length out in the lake from the dock. There is no question that I could see its features. It had long black hair and very pale skin on its face, but couldn't make out the eyes, mouth, nose, or chin, as if it was just a blob of pale skin and long black hair over it. I'll never forget the feeling that came over me. The hairs on my legs, neck, and arms all stood up, and I was paralyzed on the inside, ready to leave that moment. But we told ourselves that it was just a loon, as these birds are very popular night drifters on the lake and do their hunting late. They also have black with white colors on their coats and hunt by diving deep into the water, holding their breath up to minutes sometimes. So it was possible that a loon all of a sudden popped up out of the water after hunting a bit, or at least we tried to talk ourselves into that scenario. All of us had the creeps and noticed that it was not moving one bit, just treading water in its same place. We went back to our campfire, lit it even brighter, and headed inside to drink more. I would like to mention that there is a staircase outside of my friend's cabin, about 8 stairs in length, down to the bottom where the fire pit was and dock. At one point I noticed that the black circular object was still there, about 30 yards closer now, still looking as if it was staring right at us. I could easily see the nose on this thing's face now. Again, it was very pale, like it hadn't seen the sun in years. A very, very uneasy feeling came over me, and I immediately went inside and told my other friends to come and look quick, keeping my eyes glued to it at the door of the cabin. We went outside to see it still there, looking at us, as if this head was corked up at us with its chin in the air. Nobody dared go down to the dock anymore, and we immediately went back inside, ruling out that it probably wasn't a loon, because a loon wouldn't have tread water in the same spot. Eventually, the current would have drifted it somewhere else in a rocking manner. For a loon to stay in the same spot for almost an hour or two made no sense to any of us. This head-like object was stiff as a board and not moving. A single muscle just staring up at us from the deck instead. There was no ripple effect at all on the lake from this object. We said it was just a log and went back in. I could tell everyone else felt uneasy as well. A few hours would pass. It was super late into the night at this point, and knew we needed some sleep. Being my curious self, I looked back outside once more, and the black object had completely vanished. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief, thinking the log must have floated off or just hit shore somewhere. As we slept with the windows open that night, my other buddy Tommy and I slept in the living room, while the other 2 friends slept in the 2 separate bedrooms with their doors open. Not being able to sleep, I began to hear someone or something walking around at the bottom of the stairs to the cabin, around the campfire, and at the bottom of the stairwell. I thought I was about to shit bricks, no question whatsoever. I had heard there was off the dock now, pacing back and forth as it made the sound of clicking on the wood. It was as if they weren't sure what to do with themselves, and it lasted for a couple of minutes. Wanting to whisper to my buddy, but frozen in fear, I just kept my eyes shut and my ears on full alert.
The footsteps sounded like they took 2 steps up the deck stairs all of a sudden, but then turned around and sounded like they were sprinting out down the man-made path. After it sounded like steps were long gone and a couple of minutes had passed, I woke up Tommy, asking if he had heard the steps, both of us now sitting up. I was startled by my friend Ryan walking out of his room and saying we needed to leave a minute after these steps had stopped. He must have heard us talking, so felt he came out as well, but either way he was waking us up regardless. Something was very disturbing about his expression, and I asked him why. He woke up my other friend Kevin in the other room and said, "Let's go, get to the boat, it's time to go." He explained to us quickly while grabbing his stuff. I will never forget it. He said he was turning sides on the bed to get more comfortable. He said he had saw someone or something peeking in on the top right corner of the window, and it quickly shifted out of his view. He said all he saw was one eye, ghostly white skin, and long black hair down the window. He continued to say, "Let's go," very seriously. We locked up, and as we headed down the stairs, we saw footprints in the dirt heading off the path and all around the cabin. We picked up our step to get to the boat, not knowing what was watching us or around us. Threw our stuff in the boat, untied it, and sped off. I didn't even think about the head in the water anymore, or to look in the water. My eyes were just glued to the island, trying to spot anything moving, but I saw nothing. When we finally had gotten our stuff packed in the car and the boat tied up, we hopped in the car and took off. We had been driving for about 10 miles when out of the blue Ryan who said he had seen the creature or person outside, all of a sudden broke down in the car and started sobbing. "What was it, guys? Oh, fuck. What did I see?" We called to tell our parents what had happened on the way back and that Ryan was freaking out. They told us just to get home safely and quickly. It was late, about 5 in the morning, and no one had slept, and it was a very quiet ride home. My friend's dad, who owns the cabin, went up the following weekend and said he experienced nothing while there, but did mention footprints were still about, which he thought odd because someone or something was walking around his property, which bugged him very badly. Whatever my one friend saw in that window really hit him hard. After his breakdown, he had trouble sleeping multiple nights and ended up having to seek some help for a couple of weeks and hop on some sleeping meds. As time went on, he ended up being fine, but isn't too comfortable sleeping next to the window without a curtain. To this day, I cannot explain what happened and why it seemed to happen to us, and cannot explain what I saw in the lake and what Ryan specifically saw. Nothing has ever happened at that cabin since that night, so we were told by my friend's dad, who owns it, which I do believe him. I personally have never decided to go back to the cabin, which really makes me sad because I had a great childhood memories there. Tommy and Kevin both have gone back and been fine, but Ryan refuses to go back, and I am sticking by his side on this. Thank you.
So today's second half of this upload is the government case files, aliens/reptilians, that our government would much rather us not know about or forget. Case file number 5 from Omaha, Nebraska Metro update from October 29th through November 4th, 1990. Article by reporter Patricia C. Ress. Lincoln man recounts abductions by aliens. People have been talking about flying saucers for 45 years now, longer if you count the reports of the so-called Foo Fighters seen by pilots on both sides during World War II. But within the past 20 years, we've been hearing more about a more frightening side of these visitations, abductions by these creatures. The most famous case was that of Barney and Betty Hill,
two New Englanders returning home from vacation and unable to account for a large block of missing time. Under hypnosis, a very frightening and detailed account of an alien abduction emerged. Later, there was Betty Anderson, who told of aliens who took her through walls and closed doors. Then came Bud Hopkins, who made a study of such abductions and chronicled one case in Intruders, the Incredible Visitations at Copley Woods. Next came the Gulf Breeze sightings in Florida, and the most recent, author Whitley Strieber's accounts of his own abductions in his books, Communion and Transformation. While most of these abductions took place in the East, some say that visiting aliens have been just as busy in the Midwest, even Nebraska. A Lincoln man recently recounted his experiences during a talk at the Oakcrest Institute in Elkhorn. John Foster had been an engineer in Lincoln for a number of years. Lincoln, in fact, is his hometown and the place where his abduction experiences began back in 1950. A soft-spoken, down-home type of man, Foster reminds people of a young Joel McCrea. Alien abduction is a terrifying and traumatic experience, Foster told the audience. Psychiatric counselors don't know how to deal with this, even if you can get them to believe you. Foster has gotten help and understanding from people like Dr. Leo Sprinkle of the University of Wyoming, who has dealt with numerous alien abduction cases. He also has been the subject of ridicule and rejection by both family and friends. Often in a UFO abduction experience, things happen that are absolutely unbelievable. I've been told that it is not uncommon for families to break up after such an experience. I finally reached the point where I no longer care what people think of me, Foster said. He said he wasn't fully aware of what happened to him over the years until 1980s. In 81, he was sitting outside of his home in Lincoln with a friend, and on a lark, they both said a prayer or incantation that they had seen a flying saucer, and soon after one appeared, he states. On another occasion, March of 1966, he saw a light out behind the trees as he sat on his patio, he said, and that sight triggered a distant memory of something that had happened to him when he was in grade school in Lincoln back in the 1950s. He said 40 or 50 people were outside watching a movie when swirling lights suddenly appeared, along with a craft that initially looked like a helicopter. Foster recalled being incapacitated and feeling strange. He said he saw a craft appear with three little men who appeared to be fixing it. He felt an overwhelming desire to get inside of the craft, but once he did, he discovered it was in a different form. We got a lesson about history, mankind, and something about Native Americans in Buffalo, he said. When he looked around, Foster said he noticed that everyone else seemed to be frozen in time. They all looked like statues. He saw a woman who told him she had fixed herself up so that he wouldn't be traumatized. He said he was taken to an examining room by these creatures that looked like frogs or lizards. The woman told him they were the educators and would supervise his learning experience. He said among the strange things, Foster recalled that the lizard men encouraged him to join a Masonic lodge. After he was examined, Foster said he was sent back out of the craft to the crowd below. The woman, the being that had fixed herself up or itself up to appear as a woman, spoke to him in almost a scolding tone, saying that from then on he would be a good boy and mind his parents. The woman seemed to know a lot about him, including the fact that he and some friends had stolen pop and candy from a store. In October of '86, Foster went camping with his wife and children, and he had a short visitation which awakened more memories of a previous abduction. By mid-December, he recalled 50 abduction experiences. He said that by January, that number had grown to 2,000, and by January of 1987, he recalled 3,000 abductions. Foster has recorded memories of 50 of these abductions in detail, another 450 in short notations, and many others by location only. There are roughly 2 areas of the so-called close encounters, Foster said. These may mesh together, but there are the abductees who seem to be taken aboard a craft to be examined and contactees who appear to be contacted throughout life and seem to have some sort of assignment. In June of '87, Foster and his daughter met with several other contactees and he had the feeling that he knew them all of his life. They helped him recall experiences from coast to coast and from Canada to Mexico. I believe the UFO experiences are directed to you personally, Foster said, but there are times when you can seem to address the population in general. This is what seems to be the case with the mysterious corn circles that first appeared in England and now can be seen in Canada and the United States and other places. Foster said profound things happened to him during his abductions, and the world should know about them. He has shown how the visitors can manipulate atomic structures and change things directly at will, he states, and was told things about scientific matters over the years only to see them discovered afterward. While the entities he initially encountered looked reptilian, he said, the spiritual guides were more human in appearance and were able to phase in and out of deeper levels. On the initial level of the abduction experiences, there is a kind of excitement, Foster said, while on a deeper level, life plans emerge and there is interaction with people who have had similar experiences. Foster states there are 4 witnesses who can recall parts of at least 3 of his experiences. Foster said that to document his experiences, he has made several drawings and paintings. He believes he has encountered at least 13 different crafts. Foster said he remembers abductions that involved his friends while they were teenagers. A large floating phone booth would descend from the dark fog, and a voice seemingly from a loudspeaker would urge them to gather around for eternal wisdom and knowledge, and something else about Native American and buffalo. The voice over this loudspeaker would call them by name and could at times sound sarcastic. On one occasion, his friend shot at the booth with rifles and threw beer cans at it. When he was at Mahoney Lake in '87, Foster said he again saw both the booth and a saucer. He asked the entities to quit bothering him after he was disturbed when he couldn't recall his abductions. And they told him if he remembered the experiences, it would negate their purpose. They also told him that if he didn't want to have any more abduction experiences, he would meet people who would help him become more metaphysical, he states, and he later met such people. He said he recalls being pulled up into a kind of floating bus and taken into the future. He declined to say what he saw. Foster said he was given experiments to do as an engineer. He worked, but they shouldn't have, according to what we now know. He said the guides told him they were preparing people for a time when the chosen would be taken away. I was told to awaken people to other dimensions and to participate in these realms, he states. Case file number 6 from confidential source. The following information was sent to us via a researcher who is investigating a continuous abduction of a young, at the time, early 90s, 9-year-old boy in southern Nevada, possibly to underground levels below the same area. Names, addresses, and other details have been deleted on request to protect the source. We quote from a series of notes exactly as they were sent to us, with our emphasis added. Number 1, the Greys. He says they don't use words to communicate through him. They show their displeasure by wrinkling their noses and pursing their lips with a slight hissing sound at them. 2, he says he feels like he's being watched wherever he goes. 3, this is what they look like to him. A drawing was included depicting a traditional gray of somewhat a wiry build. 4 is what the uniform they wear looks like to him. He says the box in the middle has different colored flashing buttons. 5, there is a large boat. This is a large boat, in quotations, a sort of floating island he was brought to. Note, some aspects of the abduction suggest that this was located in large underground lake or sea within a series of deep subterranean caverns. There were many hybrids on it as well. 6, these are hybrids he sees. He says that they sit in a large circle holding hands. There is one small candle with a very large flame going. He says he is not afraid of the hybrids who blend with him, and he says it feels very peaceful and good. When asked if the Greys were the only aliens he sees, he drew the Reptilians. These are the uniforms on them also. He says the Greys come to get him, but they follow the leadership of the Reptilians. He called it a lizard. He said he sees human beings alive hanging from a wall with no eyes or mouths left. Please share with us your input on how to help this boy. We know what is happening here, and we are ready and willing to do anything we have to do. Love and light. Sincerely, names deleted upon request. Number 7 case file from Val Valerian's Leading Edge Research Report, letter from an anonymous experiencer dated May 13th, 1992. The stranger who has been in the house with this unknown monitoring device apparently is not pleased with the fact that I placed a magnet in the vicinity of the monitoring device. I put the magnet next to the place, and within 24 hours there was a generalized feeling of freedom and relief in the air. My thinking process seemed to flow easier and clearer. I guess one could say that there's less tension in general wherever I happen to be. On May 7th, I was in a parking lot to pick up Sheila from work about 9:30 a.m. reading a book. A strong feeling came over me to doze off. As I did, I dreamt that I was in my car reading a book when my visitor, in quotations, fellow opened the door, but rather brought the monitoring device and left it in the back seat of the car. He then jumped out and slammed the door with a pop that woke me up. Strange, the dream and dozing period lasted less than 10 minutes, and the dream is one of those rare types that one does not forget. What I found was particularly curious was that I knew who the fellow was, what the device was, and I actually saw the device well enough to describe it. 2 days later, the right brake system failed, and that indescribable weight seems to be in the back in the air. Again, now I shall place another magnet in the back seat of my car. This person described the entity as fouling. Face is sort of wrinkled and yet snake-like. Eyes are dark with vertical pupils. Eyes are round. The nose is small with vertical slits. Ears are very small and flat against the head. Symbol, can't remember, on the left side of the chest garment. Garment looks like a Confederate gray uniform. Does not fit tight, rather like a sport coat. Skin color, light brown. Face is expressive and shows fear. Device was black on round pedestal and appeared to be solid metal. Case file 8 from Mothman Prophecies by John Keel, page 109. I am an amateur herpetologist, and one kept 3-fanged cobras in my New York apartment until my concerned neighbors squealed to the Board of Health. Some of the descriptions of the entities impressed me as resembling some kind of reptile rather than human mammals. I didn't mention the reptile notion to anyone, but On June 24th, Leah, an alleged alien tied in with the Men in Black, visited Jane, a contactee, and refused to talk about anything but eggs. She took some eggs from Jane's refrigerator and sucked out the contents like a reptile. Jane was perplexed by this exhibition and called me soon afterward. And on page 176, 177 of Signet's 1975 paperback edition of Mothman, in reference to this same contactee, Keel states, "Meanwhile, Jane's phantom friends were visiting her daily and helpful, giving her surprising information about my own secret investigations, my interview with the Christiansens of Cape May, and the details of their pill-popping visitor. Tiny was then known only to a few trusted people like Ivan Sanderson, but on June 12th, Mr. Pohl and his friends, the being that was called itself Leah, referred to above, apparently being from the same group, visited Jane when she was alone in her house and asked for water so they could take some pills. They then presented her with the same 3 pills, told her to take one at that moment and take another one in 2 days, and the 3rd pill, they said, was for her to analyze and assure herself it was harmless. They undoubtedly knew that she would turn it over on me. 2 hours after that, she took the first pill and came affected with a blinding headache, eyes bloodshot, When her parents came home, they expressed concern because her eyes were glassy and her right eye seemed to have a cast. The simple pill proved to be sulfa drug, normally prescribed for infections of a urinary tract. The possible significance of sulfa drugs will become apparent later in these files. Case file number 9 from Robin Collins. Article source, title uncertain. Old Sumerian, Babylonian, Egyptian, and Greek legend refer to the serpent deities who were believed to have once resided in the underworld. The Garden of Eden in this context takes on additional interest and significance, possibly of paramount importance. Pristine legend from Australia and Pacific Islands offer innumerable references to serpent deities or beings who were anciently associated with the creation enigma in the area. The spiral serpent symbol is found throughout the Pacific and is associated universally the creation enigma. From the earliest days, the serpent symbol is to be seen in many parts of the world, but undoubtedly the most fascinating portrayal is the detail of an Egyptian magical papyrus in the British Museum depicting a serpent encompassed by a ray-emitting disc. The most unusual form of the serpent symbol is a spiral representing a coiled snake. It has been discovered as petroglyphs and other pictorial representations in Britain, Greece, Malta, and Egypt, as pottery designs in New Mexico, as ground drawings from the Nazca Plateau, Peru, and throughout the Pacific Islands. Aboriginal legends indicate that serpent beings were not above waging war, and an identical parallel is also mentioned in the Hindi legends of Nagas, serpent beings who came from one of the 7 worlds. Aboriginal legends state that the serpent beings waged many wars around Ayers Rock, and vertical gutters in Ayers Rock testify to these wars. Case file 10 from Venomous Reptiles by Sherman A. Minton Jr., Charles Seabear Sons, New York, 1969. The following observations are made in Minton's book. A. All reptiles have scales. All reptiles have scales. B. All are cold-blooded. C. All lay eggs. D.
All reptiles with well-developed limbs have clawed toes. E. There are lizards with elongated snake-like bodies, a type of missing link between lizard and snake. F. The modern evidence scientific indicates that all modern snakes once, in a distant ancestral past, possessed limbs which became non-existent through non-use, perhaps due to the fact that they became aquatic or semi-aquatic. G. Reptiles with developed limbs usually live underground. The book Venomous Reptiles also states the following. Cobras, according to legend, are descended from the Nagas, serpent gods of Harat or ancient India. Their worship has been traced to prehistoric Dravidian times before the Aryan invasion of the subcontinent in almost 1600 BC. The Naga power to inflict disproportionate physical damage or almost instantaneous death is explained in the Hindu Vedas as paralleling energy of creation or fire. The book goes on to state, A. Nagas are said to have appeared at a birth of the Gautama Siddhartha, who later became Buddha. B. Ancient well of Sheshna in Benares, India, is traditionally where the yoga aphorisms of Patanjali, a classic guide to students of yoga, was written. This well, in quotations, is said to be the entrance of one of the Naga's underworld layers. Sherman Minton also states that the Shashna well, an alleged opening into the underground reptilian underworld of Patalas, consisting of 7 worlds or cavern levels, may be seen today in Benares, India, and it has 40 steps leading down into a circular depression to the stone door covered with cobras that is said to lead to Patala, the reptilian netherworld. With that, my friends, I mean, here we are talking about reptilian aliens that live underground or lived underground for a long period of time. Something that I've talked about for a long time on this channel. I truly believe that these creatures, for a lack of better term, are demons, or could be viewed as demons. Probably use portals. Made pacts with the Illuminati or the One World Government to get technology from them in trade for them to experiment on humankind. I got an interesting email today talking about how in a couple of my uploads, people have claimed to have seen men in black have reptilian eyes that flash before them. That would, to me, have these creatures using their influence and power with the Illuminati and the One World Government to do their bidding and what they are meant to be doing here. Anyway, with that, I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that keeps this channel growing and going, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday.
Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.